So, প্রথমে যেটা আমি জানতে চাবো যে what is Bangladesh's foreign policy according to you?
It's a very big question. What is foreign policy? Foreign policy is a,
Bangladesh's foreign policy.
Yeah, I'm talking about Bangladesh. It's a set of calculated decisions to promote, to protect and promote our national interest. Now, if you ask me the question of how do we define national interest, that's another separate research work needs to be done, because a significant kind of evolution has taken place in the understanding and conceptualization or reconceptualization of the word's national interest. For a very long period of time, national interest was seen to be an exclusive of other things. For example, when I talk about my national interest, it means my autonomy of decision making to protect my interest apart from the interest of others. So that exclusive kind of domain or exclusive kind of approach has to a large extent lost its relevance. Now what I call it, and what many scholars have said before me, is that national interest is now no longer exclusive. It is more shared, in the sense that my national interest is no longer mine. It is also of my partners, and likewise their national interest also is my national interest. So the very concept of national interest has undergone a kind of evolution. And when we say national interest these days, so one has to look at how do we define national interest. For example, stability in the Middle East could be in our national interest, because if the situation is normal there, then I can send more workers there, earn more money. So a political turmoil in the Middle Eastern countries, although it's far away from us, can affect my national interest. So, a turmoil in the US economy is my national interest in the sense that it can affect me negatively. So when Obama, for example, 2 days back, he was dealing with the debt issue, we were very, very attentively watching what is happening there, because if that didn't come along, that would have affected the global economy. And in the process, we would have been affected negatively. So we, including, for example, China, was very, very carefully watching what is happening there. So US interest is no longer US interest, it is also the Chinese interest to see that US economy is stable. Likewise, we are also careful to see that dollar is not falling, because if dollar falls or dollar goes up, or if it is in turmoil, that affects my trade interest, my business interest. So this is what is about the shared approach of national interest, if I may put it. So the very definition of national interest has undergone a significant transformation in the recent time.
So when we are talking about Bangladesh's foreign policy, how would you say, do we do policy? Is there any kind of policy approach to the decisions that we made, or is it just a mere foreign relations?
I would say in a way it's more foreign relations. Strategy, if we have got a strategy, then we can have a policy.
So you are saying we don't have a strategy?
I would say in most cases, strategy means proactive way of looking at something. Our approach is basically, as I have seen, is more reactive. Yes, we have general outline or understanding that we want a peaceful global environment, we want a peaceful regional environment, we want to promote, we want to utilize the external environment to promote our economic growth and so on. So these are the general outlines that we have. But if you ask me, we have got a policy or strategy, I'm afraid that we have to do a good bit of research to find out what that would be.
Right.
because no, it's very, you can say, irregular, or in that sense, how can I explain it? It is not very consistent, let me put it that way. So, ekটু পরে. So when we talk about foreign policy as such, we have some tactical moves perhaps, but consistent policy, I'm not very sure if we really had that in a consistent manner. But if I say that formally, then the public will, the government will beat me. Because we say our foreign policy, why I saw the document published recently by the foreign ministry. There they have mentioned Bangabandhu saying friendship to all, marriage to none, and the Prime Minister also sometimes say that. That is what? That's a motto. Where is the policy? That cannot be a policy. Policy has to be a kind of calculated decisions to pursue certain goals. So from that angle, if you look at the policy, well, that's I'm not very sure what kind of policies we have.
So in a way, you are saying that our policymakers or the leaders, they claim that they have policies because from their point of view, these are all Bangladesh's policy. A country cannot go beyond without having policies, right? So if we don't have policies, we have relationships. How do you think that we are managing so forth?
As I say, it is more on the ad hoc basis. That's the issue. Yes, we can define anything as policy, but policy is a calculated initiatives to achieve certain goals.
Right. So when an agenda is set, for example, how do you think, because you have worked as an ambassador, you have executed at the ground level the policies, how do you think the pattern has worked if we are to develop a framework? When an agenda is set, how does it go on forth after that?
Well, the agenda is set, and then we develop a kind of very loose work plan, if I may say so, and then pursue that. So,
do you have any follow-ups? Any evaluation?
Not really.
No. So, how do you think it has affected the country's function or the leaders' decision-making nature? Because if this is the case here, it should be the case everywhere else. So how do you think it has, in other words, if I am to characterize the decision-making process, how would I do that?
Just advocacy.
Just
advocacy. And that is the problem that has, I could say, beset Bangladesh for the last 40 years, I mean, we have been pursuing, as you say, a kind of relationship is there, but policy-wise, we have been modest, I must tell you that. Look at India, for example. It's the largest neighbor that we have. Do we have an India policy? I'm afraid that I cannot say that it's there, but we have got interactions with India. We have got relationship with India. Different government came, different types of approaches they took, and as a result, the relationship has meandered from one end to another, and now we are handling an India which is much more powerful, and it's not very easy for us to handle India these days because, I mean, due to lack of our consistency, lack of our very calculated strategic vision, we have missed out many things. And same thing with other countries, for example, US, China. We ran into problems because of our lack of kind of guidelines. Policies means guidelines. These are mileposts that we set and then we move along that line.
Right.
So we don't have that.
Why don't we have any guidelines? Why don't we have any policies?
If you ask me one thing, foreign relations has, if you look at the world, foreign relations has always been the privileged position or has always been the, how can I explain, always been the domain of the head of government or head of state, everywhere. And if you ask me, one constituency that it enjoys is the head of government. And when the head of government or head of state is not really focused on this issue, then the foreign relationship or foreign policy tends to move on a loose kind of speed. So that has happened in case of Bangladesh. And also in the domestic level, Bangladesh we always remained preoccupied with our internal problems. And foreign policy or foreign relations comes in whenever there is a crisis. Otherwise, exploring the foreign policy or utilization of foreign policy for really promotion of our internal objectives is missing. I'll give you another example, but don't quote me here. In Bangladesh, we have an organization called the ERD, External Resources Division earlier. Now they call it External Relations Division. ERD is basically a division of a ministry with the responsibility to mobilize external funds for Bangladesh. ERD has always been more powerful than the foreign ministry, because they are a part of the finance ministry. And also another thing is that this organization or this division is manned by civil servants, the internal bureaucrats. So they have a better linkage, domestic linkage. In a country where ERD or external mobilization means what? Basically stretching your hand for begging. In a country where this hand is stronger than your foreign ministry, which is a promotional hand of yours, more powerful, then what kind of foreign policy are you doing? You understand my point?
Yes.
This is a contradiction. On the one hand, foreign ministry is for promotional policy. On the one hand, you are asking for aid, and the aid hand is more powerful. So this is a contradiction. There's no, and I do not see foreign ministry and ERD working in tandem ever. Always there has been a competitive kind of relationship. Look at now. The expatriate welfare ministry is there. Expatriate welfare, the moment, I am now writing a piece on that, the moment a person goes out of the country, he comes under the jurisdiction of the foreign ministry, because whenever he is in trouble outside, he comes to the mission. He comes to the mission, he seeks the mission's consular support or whatever support we can extend. But come back here, here, there is no coordination between the expatriate welfare ministry and the foreign ministry. And two are sometimes working at a cross purpose. So how can you promote your foreign relations? Come to the commerce ministry. The trade, diplomacy is a forerunner, you can say, of your trade. You go there like you are the head of a spear. You go there, create a space, and the other things follow. In Bangladesh, there is no coordination between commerce ministry and foreign ministry. They are pursuing their independent kind of interest. So the foreign policy has to be a coordinated stuff. Look at Australia, New Zealand, Canada, all the countries, they are integrated ministry, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade together, because these interests are very much aligned, relevant. So in our country, it's more of a contentious relationship. So within Bangladeshi structure, we have many foreign ministries, if I may put it that way. So if you have hydra-headed organization, then it doesn't work. That's the internal problem. The external problem, there is another thing that we still lack. I'm giving this information or talking to you to give you an intellectual or a theoretical perspective.
No, that's very good. Yes.
We are always preoccupied with our domestic. And you need to have a healthy understanding about the outside world. There, foreign policy will only be successful when you understand that other person or other states have also their interest, or you are respectful to them. Whenever I am only respectful to myself and I am not respectful to others, or not ready to look at somebody else's interest, your policy cannot work. And we have a serious problem in Bangladesh on this issue. We are always preoccupied with our interest. And we have somehow, because of historical reasons, because of social reasons, because of our political process, we do not have the culture of respecting others' interest or other perspective.
Why is that?
This is because of our political culture. We have become too obsessed with ourselves. And any nation which is obsessed with itself will not have a very productive foreign policy, because foreign policy means I have another partner. Just it could be India, it could be Myanmar, it could be Nepal, it could be US, anybody. So whenever I am interacting with somebody else, I must have a healthy respect for him or her, to understand him or her. I may not agree, but I cannot be disrespectful to him or her. So this is another kind of approach that we need to refine.
There are people who are saying that because Bangladesh is a small state, we can't have a fixed foreign policy. But if we look towards Singapore, they have their own foreign policy. Singapore is a small state as well. Sometimes we say that we are not a small state because we have such a, demographically we are bigger than anyone else. So why is this contradiction? Can we say that small state thing is a myth?
This is a small ability. You know, it is because not of the small size. It is because our ability is less. So in order to cover that ability, we say that we can't have any policy. We can have, definitely we can have. Why not? I can give you at least 2 or 3 ideas. Good relationship with all neighbors, without interference in each other's affairs, and trying to cooperate with each other for mutual progress and economic growth. That could be one pillar who will say we cannot exercise or we can develop. Number one. Number two, we need business. We would say that we need a open global environment for doing business or promotion of business. That would be our second interest area. I'm giving you the inputs of policy. Third area, we understand that we are small. So, being a small, how do we manage it? We want a bigger and open, participatory and inclusive multilateral arrangement, because that gives us more opportunity to say or raise our voice. So that should be there. And then comes in fourth, we have manpower, huge human resources, we need to export human resources and so on. So we want a regime that would allow movement of people around the world, an open world. I give you at least 4, and the fifth one, we need more investment and technology transfer. We should say that open investment regime would be in our interest, and we should promote that. So if you have got these 5 elements in place, at least you have, for the next 20, 50, 30 years, a good setting of your foreign policy. These are our priorities, and we move, then we plan, develop our strategy and roadmap, and then follow up. So who said we can't do that? So being a small doesn't hinder you from pursuing a policy. As I said, these are the 5 issues we can talk about.
So how big is the India factor now?
In Bangladesh foreign policy, it's a big factor, definitely a big factor. I must tell you, because of the geographical connection, because of the economic connection, which is sometimes is not properly evaluated or doesn't come to the public discussion. India and China, these are our major import sources, each one approximately contributing to 16 to 17% of our imports. So India is one of the largest import source for Bangladesh. So it's an important factor. Our economic life is dependent on that. In terms of movement of people, I would say huge number of people go to India, and there is a movement of Security-wise, it's very important for us because the only physical threat that we can have is from the Indian side. So India is very, very important for us. I would say 60% of our foreign policy should be consumed with India.
So when we are making our foreign policy, say historically India has played a major role for Bangladesh, and do you think our foreign policy is sort of like biased towards that still now, or is it because of the economy?
It should not be. I mean, what I can tell you is this: the Indians always argue that we have, so much of bonhomie in 71 and so on and so forth. I myself was trained in India as a freedom fighter. I fought during our liberation war. But if you ask me how do I look at India, I would tell my Indian friends that think of doing business with Bangladesh as a mature country. 71 was our emotional bond. It's like a relationship between mother and child when the baby is born. But when the child grows up, the mother grows up, the relationship changes. So that doesn't mean that it has weakened, but it changes the format. So same thing with India. I mean, if India says, oh, 1971, we have done so much for you, so you should be a part of India, forget about your independence, or give us these and that. No, I'm strong against that. It should be a mature relationship. I must give you what would help you, and you must give me what would help me. So it should be mature give and take. I will not, and that's why, whenever I talk on Indian issues, I'm very clear on that. We need to have a thorough discussion on relationship, take people on board on this, because we have to sell Indian issues, Indian policy to our people as well. And at the same time, I think that India, we should be respectful. Yes, I do not support using Bangladesh territory against India, not at all. But I also do not support India interfering in our affairs. As simple as that. A mutual respect for each other's sovereign entities. And on the economic issues, yes, I would help India to connect to this northeast through Bangladesh, but at the same time I will ask for allowing Bangladesh to connect to China if possible, because that's my interest. This is your interest, that's my interest. So we can have a swap. So I'll be tough on this. I'll give you this. Yes, I agree. But what you are giving me? I want something this is your interest, you want from me, I'll give it. But I have my own interest, I want from you, give me that. So that's what the deal I'll be negotiating for.
Who are the actors and stakeholders in our foreign policy decision making?
Couple of them. You see, the head of the government, the Prime Minister, President, that's the number one. That's the source, you can say. Then Parliament has a role, Parliamentary Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs. That has a role, although sometimes it's important, sometimes not important. Then the Cabinet has a role.
Right.
Then comes the Foreign Ministry. Then comes the missions in terms of implementation. But parallelly you can have, when you say Foreign Ministry, parallelly there are other issues. Is it open, still continuing?
Yes.
Recording? Okay. Sometimes the security agencies play a role. Sometimes other ministries, Ministry of Commerce, BOI, Expatriate Welfare Ministry. They also play some role, so you can put them in parallel with the foreign ministry. So, but horizontally they contribute in decision-making process. And the media also these days play a very important role, in the sense that they sometimes frame or define issues on which we have to act or react, for example. Some of the civil society members are active in the process. Think tanks such as the BEI, BIISS.
So, when we are talking about so many actors, we can see that it's more like the PM or the president defines what the agenda should be.
In a way, yes. In a way, although formally we would not say that, or formally that's not seen. But as I said, in any country, foreign policy lies with the head of government trustee. It's a privileged domain of them. So the political guidelines basically come from there. For example, now you see, if you look at the Bangladesh foreign policy, definitely it looks like it's, in a way, it is engaging more with India. So this is a major issue for any policy of Bangladesh. So that could not have come without the blessings or direction from the Prime Minister's office. So the Prime Minister has given the direction, then others have started playing role and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So the head of government is a prime source of foreign policy directions, and their preference, their choice, their interest gets reflected down the line in various formal setups.
What about PMO?
Oh, that's the PM who is the Prime Minister's office.
So not only Prime Minister, but PMO.
Yes, some of the actors, for example, the Principal Secretary, the Secretary to the PM, they have a role, but essentially they work as a staff officer to Prime Minister.
Right.
So.
When we are looking into our foreign policy, you have been there when the policies were made or executed. How had been your experience? What have you seen? What has been more significant when policies are made in terms of decision making? The overall characteristics, if I may put it like that.
Well, on many issues, the Foreign Ministry itself can take the initiative or decide. On certain issues, it needs broader consultation. On many issues, it needs Prime Minister's involvement, Parliament's involvement. For example, I can give you one or two examples. When Iraq war started in 2003, yes, Iraq war started, then definitely the Prime Minister was involved in the decision-making process. Then the Foreign Minister also made a statement in the Parliament, because it was such an important issue that it was important to take on board all the Parliament members. So he made a statement in the Parliament. Then extensive consultations were undertaken with different agencies, for example, different ministries, to see the impact, what impact it will have, how we can mobilize or take out our people, for example, expatriate welfare, commerce ministry, security agencies, civil society members. So, when we anticipated the situation is going to go that way, we initiated internally, even initially we started discussion in the ministry that here is a scenario evolving now, what policy we take, whether we keep the Iraqi city in Dhaka, keep the diplomatic relationship or not, should we condemn the American invasion or not. These are the issues that come up, and we had in-house discussion. Then we develop a kind of position, yes, 2-3 things. Then the Foreign Minister goes and briefs the Prime Minister about it. And if as the issue was so important, then the Prime Minister advised that you make a statement in the Parliament. And then after the parliamentary speech, the foreign minister even met with the media people to brief them about what is the government policy, what we want, and so on and so forth. So that's how it
in a very important crisis that probably we have a more, for example, distinguished pattern that would say like that. You have been the DG of South Asia for some time. What's your point of view regarding SAARC, the foreign policy, and how decisions were made over the years? I mean, since its birth.
Yeah, well, I mean, Bangladesh can be proud of proposing SAARC. So that was, in fact, my understanding is that SAARC is still one big idea that Bangladesh floated 20 plus years back. And that still resonates with a lot of people in South Asia. So that is a good, I would say, reputation for Bangladesh. However, in terms of the evolution of SAARC as an institution, has been more of a formal thing. We had a number of 16 summits with all the declarations and things like that. Barring very few things, the organization has not been very useful in terms of reaching out or producing something that people could see. Yes, there has been SAFTA, there has been SAPTA and then SAFTA, SAARC institutions in different countries on climate, on weather, on agriculture, on so on and so forth. But if you ask me, at a time when a lot of changes are taking place, both in South Asia and outside, SAARC should have done more or could have done more. But I mean, somehow the bilateral relationship between Pakistan and India, or in a larger context, the level of mistrust, distrust that we have in South Asian political landscape, that has in a way clouded the progress of SAARC.
So you're talking about mistrust. Where does it come from? What gives this mistrust?
History.
Would you elaborate, please, on this?
Well, Pakistan and India are still fighting for identity. India believes that whole of India should have one identity. Pakistan believes that it should have a separate identity of its own. So they are fighting for their identity. That is history. That is rooted in history. In some ways, although Bangladesh fought on the liberal values of culture. These days, some people are saying that, religion is a factor, and separating ourselves from India is one source of identity. So it is there. I mean, when you are fighting for your identity, then you are going to the root of your existence, and that creates tension. That energizes people. That is one. Then the recent developments in South Asia has not been as productive as it could have been in terms of giving or offering tangible benefits to the common people, so that people could go beyond that primordial ideas that they were living in. Economic cooperation has not been so visible. The people will say, oh, yeah, this is a new environment, we can have an alternative sense of identity. So that is the reason I think the SAARC has not been. And I think partially I would say that, the bigger countries, Pakistan and India, could have had a more positive approach to facilitate that process. Unfortunately, they are more interested in their bilateral interaction than multilateral or regional.
Because you mentioned about the identity thing, if we look into theory, for example, the Orientalist theory, it talks about self and others. It talks about how people are looking to us and how we are actually communicating with them. The post-liberation period, or even the post-colonial period, as Bangladeshis, do you think how we reacted to them has been more of this identity crisis that you are talking about?
We didn't have a crisis, identity crisis, because you see, we are much better than the Pakistanis in that context, because we have one solid base of identity, that is our culture.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly, our existence has been defined by two elements. One is the culture, and other is the religion.
Mm-hmm.
They have cooperated, they have conflicted. So this is a peculiar history that we have passed through. Many times religion was our savior, many times culture was our savior. Dr. Iftikhar Ahmed Chaudhary, our former advisor and another senior colleague, he did a research and he showed how Bengalis, whenever they were under pressure from the Hindu colonialists or Hindu landlords,
Mm-hmm.
they identified themselves more as Muslims and tried to get a rescue through that point. Whenever the Pakistan came and Pakistanis started oppressing us, we tried to revive our cultural identity and try to develop a new identity so that we can. And actually, that has culminated in the creation of Bangladesh.
Mm.
But once Bangladesh was created, when the governance was failing, then the Bangladeshis, again, some of the Bangladeshis thought that, well, the Awami League government didn't perform well, it failed, it was too close to India, so find out our old identity or alternative identity, which is religion. So this is a kind of dilemma that we have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the best identity or best solution that we can find these days is a good governance. Anybody who can give the good governance will define the identity of Bangladesh in the present context.
Right. This is very interesting. We are, because we are talking about theory now, Derrida's power theory, when we are talking about how power defines policy and how, if you put it to Bangladesh's foreign policy, how would you compare these two components if we are to sort of like theorize?
Power.
The power factor, the political power or the normal power
components.
Power
Okay.
components.
I would look at it. The power has, these days they define it in two broad terms. One is the hard power and the soft
power, yes.
Some say that is, yes, there is another variation called smart power. Well, in terms of hard power, I don't believe that Bangladesh has much promise here. But Bangladesh has enough soft power. And interestingly, soft power has the capacity to neutralize the hard power. Look at the American power. In terms of physical capacity of America today, America is unstoppable. Nobody can match. Even the American budget, its defense budget or defense capacity is so much that the next 40 states behind the US or below the US combined cannot match them.
Mm.
But can the US exercise all its hard power? Because it has been seriously constrained by how the people view its power as such. Excuse me. Take it later.
Okay.
So that is another, constraint on hard power is the strength of the soft power. So these days, even if a country has a lot of hard power, the use of that hard power would be regulated, if I may say so, by the soft power, how much soft power they can master. If there is no soft power, hard power is useless.
Mm.
Look at Afghanistan, look at Iraq. The Americans dominated the scene in terms of military power, but they lost the public image. The people do not support the Americans for Iraq, and they have to go back home now. They are not being supported enough in Afghanistan, for example, so they are trying to go back. Even inside America, there is a strong resistance against continuation of American presence in Afghanistan, for example. So this is the power of the soft power. So Bangladesh, for a country like Bangladesh, which has come into existence through its huge struggle and I mean, the creativity of Bangladeshi people is enormous. Bangladesh has a lot of innovation for its social innovations. These could be our soft power. And take the case of how Professor Yunus is revered around the world. I mean, what anybody would love to hear him. How many countries are there who can master that kind of personalities, for example? So these are the hard power. Our culture is our hard power. Our food could be a soft power. Our food could be our soft power. Our culture, our social creativity, our innovations, our very resilience itself could be a soft power. So these are the issues that we need to evaluate these days. Hello.